Welcome back to Hardwood Hustle. TJ and Sam with you today. And TJ, we're going to talk about 4 different topics and how important they are to the success of a season. And here they are. I'll just throw them out at you. And the style today, coaches, as you listen, will be sharing an idea and then me asking TJ kind of to speak into it. And TJ, it comes down to this, what offense and what defense we run matters. It does. What decisions we make late game and adjustments we make in a game matter. It do. All that matters. So this isn't a but comment. Oftentimes, though, standards, accountability, and how we react to adversity during a season and throughout the season will determine really how far we're going to go and what type of success we're going to have. So let me say it again: standards, accountability, adversity, and then I would throw this fourth one in, which is how you weave it all in, which is teaching. How do you teach through all of that? Teach the life lessons, teach the X's and O's, teach. And so let me ask you, with your program, what are some of the standards that y'all have day to day? Like when I walk into your practice and I walk out and I say, okay, I know the standards are A, B, C, D, E, or 1, 2, 3. What are those standards?
Yeah, well, I think this is, spot on for, a couple reasons. One of the things that I think a lot about is there's just levels to coaching and levels to winning, right? I mean, there are certain times and places you can just go in and have better players. There are certain times you can go in and just have a more organized team that plays together and runs good offense and defense and beats some people you shouldn't. And then, but when you actually talk about like taking your team to the highest level possible, then this is where the rubber meets the road. Like, can you actually do these things better than everybody else? Can you actually have higher standards that help them to really maximize their potential? Can you fight through adversity with things so easy? Like these are the things that are next level coaching, right? And I think a lot of times we think about it. Look, I mean, just take the SEC, the Big Ten, whatever. Like, there's plenty of talent and plenty of good teams in all of those places. Like, who's going to come out on top? It's going to be the team that really probably takes care of these other things that people don't talk as much about. And when more specific to your question, as far as the standards, I think there are certain things that we teach and preach every single day that are even outside the pillars of like our, having gratitude and having attitude. When I think about standards, I think more about like um, always the fault of the better player. Like everybody in our program is trying to take ownership. I think that's one thing I'm really proud of in our program, and I think it's a standard when people come watch. We've got a lot of people. We've had a couple hundred people at our practices the last month. And the one thing they generally come up to us afterwards is like, gosh, your guys really look like they like each other. Your guys really look like they're taking, like they're not arguing. They're not what like we are. The only thing we're arguing about is whose fault it is and how we can get better. And I think that's an environment we really fight hard to build. But I think making mistakes hard is one of our standards. Like, you know, I'm not expecting us, like, failure is a part of what we do. But I think making mistakes while you're going 100% is something that is a standard for us. One that we're really trying to increase this year is playing fearless. Kind of coincides with our that's one that I would think is a standard specifically on both ends of the ball, offensively and defensively. I think the idea of celebrating others is a standard. Like, it's expected that we recognize people doing good, and I think all those things sound really nice. And I think coaches probably would love that in their program. But I also say we have fought hard for those things to show up in our practices.
And I do believe that standards are standards until they're not, and they can become not really quickly. And so you talk about playing fearless, making mistakes hard, celebrating others. I think the celebrating other ones probably fits into your pillar of or value of gratitude. Right, we're going to be grateful for our teammates. We're going to be grateful for whatever is given to us. And so once you establish your standards and we say them. And at this time of year when everybody's 0-0, optimism is usually at an all-time high. And so we'll get into adversity a little bit later, but accountability becomes important. And I heard a coach say this, a Power 5 football head coach, who said there's very few head coaches who will really be relentless in their accountability. Very few that are not afraid, excuse me, to hold the best players and everybody accountable. And I think you and I have seen that over the years, and all of our years of coaching and visiting and talking and getting to know coaches at all levels is, yeah, like, do coaches really hold the line? And the answer is oftentimes no.
Yeah. Well, Sam, it's interesting because I think it's easy to sit here and say, well, they should hold people more accountable. There's a reality in sports today where um, you do hold people accountable. They're transferring, they're going other places, and then I think it's easy to reckon with yourself and be like, well, I'm going to be a player's coach and, I'm going to not hold those things accountable. And I'm going to, like look, it's easy to sit back and armchair this one because you're not actually in the situation. And all of us are not in the situation until it's our team. And when it's our team, we have a decision to make. I think one of the most freeing things, and I've shared this before, but one of the most freeing things for me was to stop making it about players and making it about the team. And those team standards are what they are, and everybody's accountable to those. And rather than trying to piece together and what, this year, what are the accountabilities, what are the things we're going to have standards around, like we just, the team has these, and then you have to hold everybody to them, and then you can become unattached to the emotion of it. Like, you know what, Sam, you're not meeting a standard, and this, we know this, and I think that goes back to the first step, which is clearly defining all of them. If people don't know, it's really hard to hold it.
Yeah, so recap that. You got to be real clear in your vision with what the standards are. Then once you set the standard, you got to hold the standard and step. I mean, there's a lot of nuance here. Like, it's easy in a podcast for us to talk standards, accountability, but the missing pieces and all that is like, are you getting buy-in from players? Are you teaching them how to lead themselves well so it doesn't always come from the coach? Are you empowering your players as a coach to live out the standard? And if it's always coming from top down, it'll feel to a player, it's like the parent who's always nagging the child. I told you to clean up your room. How many times do I have to tell you to put your dishes in the dish? Like, if you as a parent, or if I as a parent have to give, like, at some point, I'm not doing a very good job parenting if I have to keep telling my kids to put the dish in the dishwasher. Either I got to teach them or I got to do something, or it's just going to be nag, nag, nag. And I think sometimes players can feel that from coaches. So my point here is there's
Yeah.
nuance to all of it.
Yeah, there's nuances. Sam, I think there's a way to clean that up. I think the way to clean that up, and I think if I had to give one piece of advice to coaches on like standards and holding accountability, the one thing that I've changed in my career that I think has been really, really good for me, and I think other coaches would probably rest easier, sleep better, feel better if we would start being unattached to the standards or the accountability, as far as like unattached from a place of emotionally attached. One of the things, like, I've just decided these are my non-negotiables. These are the things that are going to happen in our program. And when a player doesn't hold that standard, right, it's very simple to me. It's not like, I don't care if you're the best player, I don't care if you're the worst player, I don't care what it is. Like, this is what we've decided, and I'm willing on any of these standards that we've decided are part of who we are. And I think it goes back to the beginning when we get players buy-in, but by the first week, when everybody's bought into these are our standards, this is what we are going to do all year long, then get unattached to emotions and just do what you said you would do. You said that this was a non-negotiable. You said this was a standard. Now hold it. And I'm not going to be mad. I'm not going to be sad. I'm not going to be, look, this is just part of it. Like, we decided we wanted to be great. We decided we wanted to have a fun year. And here's the standards that are going to help us do that. And so I just don't have a choice. I think when you leave yourself a choice with all of these standards, and I'm not talking about rules. Rules to me is different, right? I mean, I think that's rules and standards. Standards is something like you're going after greatness. Like rules to me are like you're trying not to get in trouble. You're trying to avoid whatever. Like standards is like, if I have to have a lot of rules, we got too many problems as is. If I got standards, we're chasing something great. And if we're chasing something great, there's not a lot of wiggle room to not uphold those standards.
Yeah, rule and some old school coaches may be listening and be like, all right, y'all, that's just like y'all's nice way of saying avoiding conflict or avoid like what we're saying here is rules aren't as good as standards. Like standards, we're all climbing up to it together. Rules are the coach, the parent, the dad has established the rules. Everybody fall in line. Do is exactly what we're saying. And in a competitive environment, I mean, I don't care what like you think about it's the second half, it's the fourth quarter, and you don't have timeouts and you're down by 6 with 3 minutes to go. You know, you're not going to win the game because you have a bunch of rules. You're going to win the game because players know how to lead each other and we'd have standards that we're chasing. You know what I mean? Like I think of it like that. Whereas if we have a bunch of rules, it's very coach centric leadership model that can be successful. Don't get me wrong. Don't and standards aren't how do I say it? When you have standards, a coach's role is very important. We're not saying that either, right?
Yeah, look, I mean, here, let me give you an example. We practice at 7 a.m. Be here at 6:45. If you're not here at 6:45, you're running, right? Like that's a rule. To me, the standard is this. Guys, when we show up, you better be prepared to have a great practice. And like what that means different things for different people. That means the training room, that means getting up at certain times, and then we constantly teach to that standard. Like look, you come in and you were a little groggy this day. Like, look, you weren't chasing greatness today. You were trying to get by. And
Hold
that's
on, let me interject. Can you have both in that? Let's use that
you
as a good
can.
example. Can a rule be? I mean, if we're going to start practice at 7 in the morning, then everybody's got to be loose and ready by 7. Would you also be okay saying, hey, at 6:45, the rule is or the standard is we're doing a dynamic warm up together?
Yes, but honestly, I don't care. I don't. I'm just trying to make a great team, and so I'm teaching. Like, look, guys, if you get in here and you see 30 shots go through the rim on layups before practice is ready to start, if you went in and you got stretched out, if you did what are all the things like this going back? Did you get a good night's sleep because we're practicing at 7 a.m.? Right? Like that's what I care about. Like I care about players that want to be great and gain edges. And, like if we're fighting tooth and nail for people to be there at 6:45 for a 7 o'clock practice, we got bigger problems, right? Like we got bigger problems and things we have to. Now, I'm not saying that it's easier said than done because sometimes, like I know you go to a middle school team or a high school team, there's different levels of care. So your standards might be a little bit different. You might be starting with a few more, I hate calling them even rules, but you might have a few more rules that are like, hey, listen, but here, the most important part of that to me is this: they understand why. Okay. So like, it's not like be here at 6:45 or you're running. Listen, be here at 6:45 because it's almost virtually impossible to show up ready to have a great practice if you get here at 6:59 for a 7 o'clock practice. In the 15 minutes prior, here are the things that you can do to prepare yourself for a great practice, right? That is helping them develop standards that are going to make them better versus the rule 6:45 or you run. And so I think the teaching part of it is where coaches separate themselves.
Yeah, and let me rattle off. Like I think this is another good example. So, when Coach K took over the Olympic team, TJ, there was a needed change in culture. And one of the things he did, he's coaching pros now, the best of the best. He had to get players to buy in. He had to get LeBron and Jason Kidd and Kobe. And like here, I'm not going to read off all 14 standards, but like one is no excuses. We have what it takes to win. Communication, we tell each other the truth. collective responsibility. We are committed to one another. And poise. We show no weakness. So they defined it, and then I'm sure they talked about it. And then when things fell below the standard, it was coached. You celebrate it when it happens, and you coach it when it doesn't. And by the way, it's not going to happen every day. The high standards are hard to get to. They're hard to be consistent. Most people listening to this, they hit snooze when their alarm goes off. You know why? Because it's hard to be consistent and get up when you say you're going to get up. And so coaches and players, like, when we're chasing standards, man, like, we're going for it and we're going to fall short, but then we got to coach it, correct it, and get back on track.
Yeah, I think really important is setting the bar at the right place. And I think typically people set the bar much too low or much too high. And the bar needs to be set at a place that you're stretching to. It's going to be hard to obtain. But at the same time, so for instance, like when I think about, like, let's just say it's, eighth graders or seventh graders, they're younger kids, and you're yeah, you can listen to us, and like we just did one on culture. Me, you, and Micah did one of our PGC coaching tracks on culture, and you talked about what it was like to set standards in your culture on a travel team where it's a shorter season. Maybe you have 2 months or 3 months together or whatever. Micah talked about taking over a new college and setting standards, at a new place. There's no culture been built. Like, he's now taken over. They don't know him. And then I talked about what it looks like to, I'm near 20 years at the same place where we've built and established a culture. So that looks different for everybody, right? So I can't just come here and tell you, oh, this is what TJ would do. Our standard is this. When we first started out fighting for those standards in the little things, there was so much back work. There was so much loading up of helping people to understand and getting just to a place of, like, I had 50 standards I want us to uphold, but in year one, it might have just been good at 4 or 5 standards that this played out every day, and when I started the culture, it was really simple. It was, be a great teammate. And there's only 2 types of mistakes that I won't tolerate: attitude and effort. So be a great teammate, have a great effort, and have a great attitude. Like, and that was it. Like, and that's what I fought for every day. Like, like being on time and all that other stuff. Like, yes, it was important. It was important, but there was 1,000 other hills I could choose to die on if I wanted to coach everything. And then eventually a lot of those things get put to bed and you can stack and add it on those. So a lot of it's age stage appropriateness and how well you've established that culture over time.
Yeah, and I mentioned, like, the 14 standards. Like, you probably less is more, right? Less is more, and you said it, stack it, but, like, get really good, get maybe great, maybe excellent, maybe special at 3 things, and be great at those 3 things in your culture with your standards, and let them be foundational. Like, that's where I say competing slash effort is a foundational standard that will bleed into other things. Being a great teammate, that's a good standard to chase after.
Yeah,
Now,
I would add this, like, one of the ones you said is saying, like, great effort, playing really hard, right?
yeah,
That might be a standard that you really have to fight for in the beginning, but then you get to a certain place where it's established and you don't really have to fight for it anymore because the new players that come into your program, they stick out like a sore thumb.
yeah.
And you don't even have to yell at them. You have to tell them. You just have to be like, hey, listen, it won't work like this. These guys, these girls, they all play way harder than you do,
Mhm.
and you don't even have to, like it, but as in the beginning, you might have to really fight for that. But over time, it can change.
Yeah, that's a good point as well. And I think let me move into this and highlight for everybody listening. You have said this throughout, but you haven't said this, which is, it comes back to, and always will, do you teach the why? Do you just tell them a standard and you put it on the t-shirt or on the locker room, but nobody really knows why? But I think a master teacher is constantly threading it back to why we do this. And I think that's really important in all this, is teach the why, know the why. If you don't know the why, it might be time to drop that standard.
Yeah, here. And here's one more step to that, Sam, that I'm finding more and more important as I get later in my career is that why, if it registers with them, it's a really powerful why. Like if they believe in the why, so you can say like, hey, here's why we do this in our program. And that's important. Most coaches don't give the why. And so now they understand why you're doing what you're doing. But if the players have the same why you do, then it's something that is like really easy to coach. Like they believe in what you believe. And so I think fighting for those whys to register with them is also really important because it just speeds the process up. This is why we choose to rebound this way. And here's how it's going to help us win games. And they're like, I'm in. And then you just hold them to that. Like, listen, we all agreed like we would win games if we would commit to this on rebounding the basketball. And, you're not doing this. And
Yeah.
it's simply, are you committed or are you not? I'm committed. Okay, let's change. And that's a way different way of, holding a standard than having to just really fight tooth and nail to get people to buy in.
Yeah. So standards and accountability before we move into adversity, you got to establish the standard. You got to create a vision behind it. You got to get buy-in. Then accountability is backing it up. Now we talked about the why. The last thing I would share on accountability and standards is relationships. Rules without relationships lead to rebellion.
Hmm.
One more time. Rules without relationships lead to rebellion, or standards without relationship. Accountability without relationship will probably lead to rebellion, either in front of you in your face as a coach, or definitely in the locker room or on chat, text messages. So like build a relationship, because if all you do is just lead with an iron fist, uh, unless you have great kids who just, man, they just eat it. Like you're probably gonna have some rebellion.
Yeah. Hey, the first thing I thought about when you said that was like, that's really true in your own family. Like when I'm close to my kids and I'm spending quality time with them, right? And I feel like they want to uphold the rules and not disappoint and whatever. And there's also times when it's like I'm really busy. I haven't had quality time with them. I haven't, and they're more likely to talk back to their mom. I mean, being really truthful, like just simple things like that. I think it plays out not only with your team, but it plays out with in parenting. Like the stronger that relationship is, because there are times when I'm busy and I go about and I'm just ruling with an iron fist, like do this, pick up your room, But it's different when we're connected as a family and you're connected with your kids.
I'm, I'm laughing because during season, I feel like I get into more coach mode, and my coach mode comes home and into my home. And there comes a time every season where like Sarah or the kids, like, they're like, stop coaching us.
Yeah,
Like, I need to chill out, because I'm like coming home. I've like coached for 4 hours, and then and it doesn't go well
yeah,
because I'm like, a tornado coming through the house. So that's a good
yeah.
reminder for me.
I've,
All
I've
right.
been there, done that. I mean, it's same like my daughter. I mean, like my wife told me the other day, you need to spend time with your daughter. And it was a little bit of rebellion, a little bit whatever. And then I took her to get coffee for school, and then we hung out for a little while. Then we worked out. We got up and worked out basketball the other day, and then we went up, we shot another time, and then it's like she flipped. I mean, she just completely flipped, like to cleaning up her own room, like to doing other things that we would typically have to fight her tooth and nail. Like, okay. And I mean, it's wild how it can get away from you like that.
Yeah. All right. That's good. Really good stuff. All right. Let's move into this final, piece here, which is adversity. And, again, what offense you run matters, what defense you run, how you teach it, your late game situational play, all that's playing into winning. And, again, reiterate, TJ, I think you and I both, we're trying to live out this journey ourselves as coaches and within our PGC coaching community of like going for championships while also being transformational and doing those two things. But the adversity piece is this: not if, but when. When adversity strikes, and multiple times during the season, practices, games, whatever it is, or, the culture, there's a crack in the culture, or there's relationship strife amongst players or coaches and players. Like it's all going to happen. this is where teams culture really shines or it falls apart. And so you say it, you've said it going back a few years best at our clinics is a good culture is like a good family where you're gonna have a lot of fun, you're gonna laugh together, you're gonna smile, you're gonna win, you're gonna do all that, and you're gonna have some bad times. But a good culture can handle the bad times where a bad culture falls apart. So don't have a question for you, just after the opening thought, like what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, my thoughts go back to what you said a minute ago, relationships. Genuine relationships where you care about people at a deep level and they know you care for them and they care for you. You make it through hard times, you know what I mean? Like you make it through those different situations. I mean, I mean, truthfully, there's a lot of times when I see things happen that I'm uncertain how people make it through without faith. Like I personally, like I can't see that. I don't know how you make it through without that. But when it goes to things that might be that severe of just making it through a season of disappointment or a loss or something like that, I think just having genuine relationships um, where people are committed to each other, then you find a way. I mean, it's pretty same thing. Like and I hate to relate this, but like when you're in a marriage and the two of you have hard times up and down, whatever, but you know that you're in it together for the fight. Like we've built a foundation where no matter what, we're gonna find a way to win at this. Then you make it through hard times. But if you go in and you're half committed, you have average relationships, and you go like that's when the time is good. The hard times are really going to test you. And I think that's where it goes back to it's so important. That's why I always say this: a transactional coach, like they're actually hurting their season because their team because there's going to come a time when if you're not transformational, you don't have these, like it's going to fall apart. And so it's almost like if you're just transactional and just want to win, I would say, you know what you need to do? You need to be transformational because you're going to have to get through some of that stuff, right? And you can look at different things. I don't know. I don't know how. I think most of the time you see special teams, even in the pro levels, there's a level of connectivity that helps them do that, whether it's in the NBA, whatever it is, like just watching those games, there's a level of connectivity. But are there times when it's just, pay for play and people win? Because that might happen sometimes at the highest levels. But for 90% of the rest of the sports world, to achieve something special, you're going to have some people that get through some hard stuff together.
Do you think most players desire a transformational coach or transactional? And it's an honest question. I mean, I think the answer is transformational, but what do you think?
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely do. I mean, look, at the end of the day, I believe people are I think people care about doing the right thing. I think people care about who loves them and who they love. I think people care about being surrounded with people that hold them to a higher standard that make them better. I think I just think that's human nature. You know what I mean? Like I don't think it's human nature to just worry about succeeding and winning and being transactional. I think that may be some things that have creeped into our civilization, especially Western civilization, just in general, like win, most money, I think those things that have creeped in and that have probably been some lies sold to us. But at the heart of people, I actually think they really crave all the things that go along with the transformational experience.
Yeah, and so let's talk some tangible stuff with conflict, adversity, and how coaches could be ready for it better. Because I think there's a lot of art to this. Like when there is adversity, are you going to address it in front of the team? Is it more better in a private one-on-one setting or in a small group? Like those are important decisions to think through and be aware of. And and sometimes, that decision matters a lot. So like within our blueprint, that we created, like the conflict and adversity, we said anticipate it, number one. So I do think that's a good start. Like you shouldn't be overly surprised when it happens. Some things are one-offs and like come out of left field on you. Like you should know that at some point in the season, if you're coaching middle school or high school kid, you're going to get a parent email, right? At some point, you should know if you're coaching alpha males in college that somebody's going not scoring as much or may feel ego gets in the way and like some alpha energy, maybe your second and best leading scores, maybe there could be strife there at some point, right? Like I'm just throwing out like, but anticipate it. Then you got to embrace the adversity. And then we say there's shared ownership in it. And the last two is like, do you have the courageous conversation, which I referenced, and then a renewed commitment. I'm not saying you're always going to follow that 5-step plan, but what's some more tangible things for coaches, TJ, that they can take and apply with their leadership?
Well, I mean, all of those steps I think are really important. And we spent a lot of time trying to think about but I think I think your approach to adversity is really important, because nobody wants it. I mean, everybody wants at the end of the day to, like our finances are good, or our kids are doing great, or, our team really everybody wants peace and comfort and, like that's what people crave. I think what's really hard to buy into is, we had Tony Bennett on when he talked a lot about this. I mean, probably the best example of handling adversity we've ever seen. Like, he didn't want to lose a 16-1 game. You know what I mean? Nobody wants that. Nobody craves that. But the reality of it is there's only probably 1% of people in the world that could have taken adversity that they had and handled it that way and and take you to a national championship the next year. You know what I mean? And oftentimes that adversity is really what defines our life. And I've shared before, it's defined. There's so many. If I think about the most defining moments of my life, they're all situations that were really adverse that I didn't want to happen, but they defined, and I think one of the things that for these young people that they're oftentimes never get to see, that's never modeled for them, is how to show up in adversity, how to show up when things aren't going well. It's almost, there's a reflection here in society. I think a lot of our coaches probably feel this, that when it doesn't go well for the kids they're coaching, what are their parents doing? They're stepping in. They're trying to fix it for them. They don't want their kids to be uncomfortable. They don't want them to not get the most shots, not get playing time. So a lot of you coaches out there are so bothered by the parents that are trying to protect their kids from any level of adversity. But I think you have to flip that question over to yourself as a coach. How am I showing up? When adversity, am I trying to protect my team from adversity? Am I trying to brush it under the rug when adversity comes? How am I actually showing it up? Because one of the things that concerns me is how many good examples do our young people have of how to handle adversity? And one of the reasons is because we simply try and avoid it from as much as possible, and not even with bad intentions. Look, Sam, my dad wanted better for me than he had in his life. I want better for my kid. You know what I mean? That's almost some natural human instincts. But better isn't always protection. And I think sometimes we think it is.
So one tangible or one quick example story. Last night, TJ, we had practice, and prior to practice, I had asked to meet with one of the players' moms of a kid I've coached the last couple of years, and this mom's a bit of a mama bear, and last year just kind of hovered a little bit and created more challenges than needed, and so this was a moment where before we go into a first game, I called a meeting and addressed this in a respectful way, but in a direct way, like. And that's an art of it too. Is like, how do you go into a conversation and be direct but not a jerk? Because sometimes people confuse being direct with like being unkind. And so I had a conversation with her and said, this is my perception. Last year is last year, but I want to learn from it and not have the same mistakes this year. And I said, I think you got to let so and so fail a little bit. Like, they struggle to handle adversity, talking about her son. And I said, look, I'm a parent too. Sometimes my son touching the stove and burning his finger is good for him because he'll never touch it again. Sometimes when he runs down the driveway and falls down and skins his knee, it's okay. Now, we're not going to let the kid run off a cliff and die, but the point to your point is we got to let him go through it. See, this mom wants to TJ like jump in if playing time goes down or not playing as well. It's like let the kid advocate for themselves. And it's what's funny, this isn't funny. What's interesting in all these cases I've had over the years, the parent who says, well, so and so they don't advocate for themselves very much. The ironic thing in it all is all the parents who say that, one of the commonality is the parent advocates way too much. So guess what? There's no room for the child to advocate because they're not forced to. And so guess what? The cycle just continues. And I'm bringing home the point that you made, which is we got to let kids go into adversity, or like Missy said from Army, like run into adversity. And I get it. Like a 13-year-old and a 33-year-old are going to look at adversity different, but it's a part of life. And when my biggest moments of growth as a player, as a dad, as a businessman, as anything in my life have usually come in some of my biggest challenges and my biggest disappointments. I didn't love it, but that's when I grew the most. And that's when we got our teams are oftentimes going to grow the most, is when we're in the valley and then we got to climb the mountain again. And so I think coaches embracing that would be advantageous.
Yeah, and it's funny because it's difficult. There's times when my kids are going through things, and Mama Bear, my mom, my wife, she comes out and she's like, I'm gonna do, and I'm like, and I might feel similar to what she feels, but I also know better. I'm like, we can't do that.
Yeah.
We can't do that. Like, how would you feel if some parent came and said that to me as a coach? She's like, well, they wouldn't say that to you because you care so much. And I'm like, no, they'll say it. They do, like they're feeling it, at least if they're not saying it. And it's just like, but it's just natural. It's natural to love your child that way. It's natural to want good things for them. And it's also natural, I think, sometimes for a coach just to be like, you parents are idiots, and not step into the shoes of the parent for a minute. We had, I don't remember, I actually go back and listen to some of our episodes. Like every once in a while when I'm thinking about something. My wife gave me a hard time about this. She's like, what are you doing? I said, I'm listening to a podcast. She said, what podcast are you listening to? I said, Hardwood Hustle. She's like, oh, so you go to yourself for advice? Like on what you should do? I was like, no. I actually pulled up Greg Tonigal from Indiana Wesleyan.
Yeah.
As I was thinking about one of our culture things. So just last week I was pulling it back and
playing fearless. He talked about that.
Yeah. And so I was going back and I was listening to that, and, and talking just, about the different things that we go through adversity. And I think that it's easy. One of the things that he said, I thought was really powerful in that episode. He's like, I don't think anybody should be allowed to be a head coach until they have kids. And I was like, oh shoot, man. Like, because you see it different, right? When you actually have to put yourself in that perspective, which I thought was an interesting thought, but it's really easy to muddy those waters.
It is. Yeah. Well, good conversation, TJ and coaches. We covered some ground here. Recap. We talked about conflict and adversity. We talked about standards and accountability, and then the importance of relationships and teaching the why. Threading those two things through everything you do. And coaches, you're going to make mistakes. TJ's going to make a mistake probably today in practice, and he's going to make one in the game, and he's going to make one, and I might make a mistake too. You'll make more than me, TJ. But the point is, the
point is that I'll own mine more than you'll own yours. Is that what you're going to say? No, go ahead.
No, but in all seriousness, coaches, we're going to make mistakes, and that's okay. But keep those things front of mind. Hit us up, Hardwood_Hustle. Let us know what you think about this. We love to have feedback. Please go in, rate and review. Really helpful for us. And for TJ, I am Sam, and we are the Hardwood Hustle.
Thanks again for tuning into this episode of the Hardwood Hustle, where we believe in the value of a coach. Be sure to check us out on Twitter and Instagram at Hardwood_Hustle to stay up to date on the latest episodes and share your thoughts with our coaching community. From the Hardwood Hustle team, thanks again. We can't wait to be with you again next week.